Hi, my name is Vivi. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and I'm working in my private practice, Phoenix Rises Counseling. And talking about trauma, I did not get beat up. What happened to me was that I landed in California. And I have the theory that the moment you land in California, you turn blonde, pink, you have puffy lips, and you might even have burns on your face. Um, that was an eye laser. I had intentionally had my eyelids burned off yesterday because I don't like my saggy eyelids. So not traumatizing. But since I'm in California, I had an interesting experience and it brought up ideas to me that I think are valuable to share. So here in California, people just live through the wildfires or to what was called the LA firestorm. And I was talking to someone, and the person was, of course, talking about experiencing a lot of anxiety and restlessness, not being able to sit down, difficulty sleeping. And it makes sense to us, right? A traumatic experience happened. That's post traumatic stress disorder. Makes sense. But when I was talking more to the person, there were many other feelings present. And I understand that as a therapist, but people often don't understand that about trauma, and it can cause so much distress and suffering that I would like to explain it. So, again, let's imagine a fire happened and that was scary, and there's anxiety. And what that triggered is the loss of safety. The fire took the the feeling of safety. And And you don't want to go off and just treat, well, the fire and the trauma and the PTSD that comes with it, which, I mean, you should really. You should, so that the trauma doesn't haunt you for a lifetime. But what's even worse about it is that one trauma can set off an entire trauma spiral. In fact, most of the time it does. So the fire represents the loss of safety. But what that does is, in our amygdala, in the trauma center of the brain, in our survival center, it's almost like there's a folder, and it is neurological, but I just call it folder so you can imagine it better. There's a folder, and it's labeled loss of safety. And the fire opens that folder, and all the experiences come spilling out. Everything that ever represented loss of safety during the lifespan. And so then so you have the fire, and of course you're dealing with it, and probably in the first 3 months, that's acute stress disorder. But then over time, there are these disturbing emotions that don't seem to make any sense. And that is because the loss of safety triggers or is connected to other memories, such as a time when it was difficult to pay the mortgage because work was slow, loss of safety, or financial hardship after a divorce, loss of safety, or the divorce, loss of safety, or before the divorce, the betrayal by the partner, loss of safety, and then the abandonment by the partner, loss of safety. And then that can trigger abandonment by, let's say, a father who is maybe unavailable in childhood, loss of safety. And then maybe he left in a divorce and you live with your mother and your life wasn't the same anymore, loss of safety. And so all these experiences, the whole trauma spiral is triggered because neurologically all of these experiences are connected, and they're stored in this folder, and you think you're just disturbed by the fire, but there's so much more going on. And this folder in the amygdala, loss of safety, it has a core belief, something where loss of safety, what you tell yourself about yourself when you're experiencing loss of safety. And most likely that was very early on. It can be like, if you summarize it, we call that a core belief in EMDR. I'm unsafe, or I'm vulnerable, or I'm helpless, or I'm powerless. That's really, really scary. And that will be activated by one trauma only. So again, if you did experience a trauma, absolutely go into trauma treatment, EMDR or cognitive behavioral therapy that's trauma focused. I'm an EMDR person. Let's say, I really try to be more organized here. So as this trauma spiral is triggered, a person might experience these intense feelings or even outbursts that don't seem to make any sense. They make sense to a therapist, but you're not to a person who doesn't understand the connection. So there might be, for example, sudden crying fits, and well, we could relate it to the fire, but it's can also be related to, well, the father who was unavailable, and there was loss of safety, and might trigger the belief I'm powerless, I'm helpless, I'm vulnerable, I'm unsafe. Or there can be fits of anger, of just smashing things all of a sudden. And again, of course, the fire and the scariness of it, of course, it triggers anger at life or that this happened. But it will also trigger anger that's maybe related to the divorce. And then a person who experienced, the fire might all of a sudden feel really distrustful of people and have no idea where that is coming from. And that might be triggered by the memory of the betrayal by the spouse and the divorce. But if we don't know that, if we don't understand that, we tend to feel crazy. We tend to feel like there's something wrong with us, and we might feel alienated from ourselves. And then even worse, we might not want to talk about it because it seems so embarrassing. It seems like I'm out of control. I have all these crazy emotions. I don't know where they're coming from. Of course not, because they're going to be somewhere somewhere in the back of your awareness. Say that in the subconscious, but they might not be consciously available. And so I think the feeling crazy and feeling out of control and then wrestling all these different emotions or reactions that come exploding out and not knowing what that is, that's just a very scary, disturbing place to be. And I would like to normalize that for you. So if you experience one trauma, just to understand that it most likely will activate the entire folder in the brain that's with related experiences. And so if that happens to you, if you have one trauma, I mean, by all means, get it treated, but get the entire spiral treated. So track the core belief, track it down to the earliest time you remember feeling that way. But what I want you to be able to do after watching this video is that you understand it. So let's say something really scary, something traumatic happens to you and you start to feel crazy, and one moment you want to smash your favorite coffee cup, and then you have a crying fit, and then you feel abandoned, and then you feel lonely, and then then you're worried about money, and then whatever comes up, you're not crazy. It's a trauma spiral that was activated, and it triggers memory, and they don't readily come out because really you're still busy with a fire, but they will be operating for you. And if you can recognize that and label it, it calms down the nervous system. So if you know what's happening to you and you understand it, you can start to calm down. And a good way of doing that is, well, first of all, don't ever be mean to yourself. If you're going through this crazy emotional storm and you know something dramatic just happened to you, just be really kind to yourself and talk to yourself kindly. It's okay. It's okay. It's trauma. It's trauma. You're not crazy. And you can try to ride feelings back in time. Let's say if they don't seem to be related to the traumatic incident. So let's say the fire. They might be, but you can write them back in time. What's the earliest time I remember feeling that way? Oh, yeah, loss of safety. Oh, yeah, after the divorce. Oh, I was struggling financially. And just acknowledge that and validate that for yourself, that this is just the trauma spiral. Everything grouped under the belief or in the folder, I'm unsafe, is coming up for you. And if you can recognize it and find it inside of yourself and validate it, okay, I'm experiencing trauma, I'm fine. The nervous system starts to calm down and your anxiety levels will come down. And then please seek treatment. Seek treatment for trauma and ride all the related experiences back in time. Because in a way, a trauma that you're experiencing, so a bad event, also is a chance to not only work through that bad event, but really a lifetime of traumatic experiences that are stored below your awareness, that are firing every time when something similar happens. So a trauma, in a sense, is also an opportunity to free yourself from a lot of unresolved stuff that you've been carrying around with yourself that you no longer need. And you deserve your peace of mind. I hope this was helpful for you today. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. And know that you're important and your well-being is important.